afternoon, everybody. Hey, question on the TV then. If we have any public can the public be in on this too?
They're on the phone call.
They call on the
Okay.
phone, yeah.
Okay.
And all you do is ask Desi. Is Desi in the back?
Yes, yeah, the team in the back, if there's anybody on the line for.
Okay. Okay. So Desi, is there anyone on the phone?
I see no one on the phone, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks. All right, let's do a call to order.
Chairperson Ferguson?
Here?
Chairperson Ferguson.
Here?
Member Bagwell.
Here.
Member Mayhorn.
Here.
Member Resnick. Member Molina, excuse me.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. Public comment, even though there's not any public on the phone, public is invited at this time to comment on or discuss any topic that is relevant or within the authority of the Carson City Audit Committee. In order for members of the public to participate in the committee's consideration of agenda item, the committee strongly encourages members of the public to comment on the agenda item during the item itself. No action may be taken on a matter raised under public comment unless the item has been specifically included on the agenda as an item in which action may be taken. Since there's no public on the phone, we'll go to number 4, review and approval of the audit committee meeting minutes from, I can't believe it was January 6th. Wow, okay. So January 6th is audit committee meetings. Any comments, questions, or concerns?
Mr. Chair, the agenda indicated that the minutes were from January 6, 2019. It's January
20.
6, 2020.
Correct.
Do we have any issue? It's the wrong date. The posted agenda.
That's a good question. On the agenda that I'm looking at,
Oh, there's a second agenda. Was there a revised one?
I have,
Oh, I've got two different ones.
I have-
This one says, I'm going with that.
I have January 6th, 2020.
Because that says 19 on that
Ours
one.
says 19 too.
Yeah, one sheet you gave us says 19.
That's okay. So maybe the printed one, the online one said 2020?
The online one does say 2020.
Perfect. Okay, I'm more than happy to make a motion if you'd like.
Please.
I move for approval of the meeting minutes of January 6, 2020.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes, thank you. Next up is adoption of today's agenda.
There's no changes.
Okay, no changes. So we'll move on. Item number 6, we're moving along at a rapid pace. Up for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the approval of the internal audits and recommendations to the city departments. Staff summary, I'd Bailey completed accounts payable and procurement card internal audits from the FY20 audit program. Briefing will address internal findings, recommendations, and agency responses. So
And
with
I'm
that,
actually going to turn this over to Audrey Donovan. She's our internal auditor who helped perform the procedures.
good afternoon, Audrey.
Thank you, Sherry. This is Audrey. Thank you, Audit Committee Chair. Don't know if you can see us clearly on video. It looks like there may be a slight delay, but wanted to walk you through the accounts payable and P card performance and internal audit that we conducted. The objective of our internal audit was to focus on the finance department's accounts payable invoice payments and their procedures, as well as the vendor management and the entire P card process. So the staff were very helpful, very knowledgeable. As you know, they had gone through a system implementation and change, and we were really looking to see that the internal controls were still in place, that the policies and procedures were still functioning as intended for the new system. The scope of our project, the time frame was from July 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. So almost 6 months ago that scope was conducted. We wrapped this up in April of 2020, and we had 4 findings and recommendations. They were all agreed to with implementation dates, and I can quickly go through those findings with you. The first finding was really a repeat finding from the last internal audit that was conducted of the P-card program. This was one that stated had not been fully remediated. So we were saying, let's update the policies and procedures here to identify P-card single transactions that exceed the $10,000, as well as, $5,000 in total transactions or $10,000 per month. So this was more of a true up of what's going on internally, the internal practices versus what's been documented in the policies and procedures. The second
And-
one was around, sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Audrey, I just wanted to say, we get an excellent rebate for using our P card, so we do encourage people to use the P card. If a vendor will allow us to use the P card on a big purchase, we will increase their limit for one time, and then it drops back down the very next day. However, we do that, like I have to approve it. It doesn't, we don't just do that without approval. And it's just not documented in the policies and procedures that she's stating. So it's a procedure update we need to make.
Hey, just curious, which bank provides the P card?
Bank of America.
BOA? Okay, thanks.
It's a procurement card, so it's the credit card system that we use throughout the city. Yeah.
And that excludes, does that exclude all travel, or is the travel card program a separate thing?
No, they're allowed to take their P card when they travel, and
Okay,
they're not allowed to charge meals on it because usually we do that per diem, but they charge their hotel and shuttles and that kind of thing, and they have to have receipts. There's a big policy.
okay, thanks.
So
Audit Committee Chair, would you like me to continue, or how would
I
you
have
like to
just a
proceed?
general question on the $5,000, $10,000 transactional limits in there. Is the reason that we're occasionally going over because we're buying maybe a large piece of equipment? Is it generally Public Works where that activity has an opportunity to get us a bigger gain? Is that where it
Public
is?
Works occasionally needs it. IT occasionally needs it. If
Okay.
they, buy several pieces of equipment throughout the month, we'll increase them a little bit so they can get past those thresholds and use the P card because we want to encourage it, but we just want to lock it down so it's not abused. So that's the purpose for that approval.
So can I ask on the audit, when you reviewed the couple of transactions or whatever that did not match the policy, is what Ms. Russell just indicated that it did, however, go through the finance department where they increased the limit and then put it right back down? So it is purely a policy correction that needs to be made?
That is correct. All the instances where we had noted where the approval limit had been increased, it is system-based and it goes back to the original amount, as she indicated. Those increases you'll find in another recommendation, or maybe we consolidated here. It is just a system prompt, and we're asking for documentation to be entered into the system in a comments field to indicate that had happened and why, so that going forward we can have more support to the activity and understand if these need to be increased permanently or if we had something going on in the system that was an error that really wasn't legitimately the person authorized to change that. So we were requesting that additional comment field be filled out.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, one quick question, just so I understand what the capabilities are around the purchase order system and how it ties into P-card activity. Do large P-card transactions require purchase order approvals?
They do.
Okay,
And now we can actually clear those purchase orders with the P card transaction. In our old system, we could not.
okay. And
So-
the approvals are electronically workflowed?
Mhm,
Okay,
they are.
great. Good news. Thanks.
Sorry, Audrey, you
Okay.
can go on to
Sorry,
finding
Audrey.
two.
Thanks. So finding 2, I jumped ahead. It is not consolidated in finding number 1. Number 2 is what I was saying earlier is that we can flag where we have increased the approval limits, and we're asking that the city, the finance department document going forward what that is, or maybe I'm getting this one confused. This one may be the segregation of duties, where we had the one transaction that exceeded the limit, and the same individual who purchased the exceeded amount was also the same individual that is able to approve. The city has modified that approval process, and it was just a one-off through the tourism, Carson City Tourism Authority, a component unit. So that has been adjusted, and those going forward, any of those purchases will be approved by the city manager.
Yeah, this was caught a
Or their
few
board.
months in. When we implemented, we just put the CTA director as the approver of his own card, and clearly that is not okay. So, so somehow that got messed up when we set it all up in the system, and now Nancy's his approver and has been for quite a few months. But they obviously did a very, very thorough audit because they did catch it. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
The third finding is again, an outdated policy procedure in place. I apologize, I have somebody at my door. I have contractors at my house putting in concrete, a new patio. So I just lost my train of thought. Hold on. Oh, this is the city has the same employee as they are a vendor. So we went through and ran the vendor listing and compared that to all city employees and noted about a handful of individuals who are city employees, but then also listed as a vendor with their own company. So we noted that the city didn't have a policy for this or against this, and wanted to make sure that the city had documented what the rationale and the process was going forward. These individuals were all vetted through the purchasing department and probably the district attorney, and we're just saying let's document that in a formal policy going forward.
So, yeah, so off the top of my head, I can come up with Casanelli Landscaping. They go through the bid process. You know, we hire them for landscaping on the NID and throughout several districts. Well, the owner's wife works in our HR department. So we're a small city, and I mean, it's hard when you have 900 employees that none of them are going to work for any of our vendors, or their spouses aren't going to own a company anywhere. So we're going to have to come up with a policy on how we vet those and ensure that they are, I mean, obviously everything goes through the bid process and there's quotes involved when we hire people. There's Diane Baker, her son or something owns a computer company. And so we went through the bid process and we ended up hiring a different company, even though that company applied. So we do make it very fair. We just need to have that documented in the policy.
Can I ask, is it disclosed on the bid sheets?
I'm
that
going to put
there's
you on hold really quick.
Is there an employee notification in there that they have a relative or something that works for the city? When you even apply for respond to an RFP? Is there a disclosure component?
That's a good question, Supervisor Bagwell. And I do not know off the top of my head if there is a disclosure on the bid documents or not. We can
I
look into
know, I'd have
that.
to check with Carol Akers, but we'll get back to you on that.
I would appreciate that, because that could be a piece of your,
Or just a simple question, are you related to anybody who works with the city? You know,
Right.
something. Yeah, I'll
Right.
get back to you on that.
okay, because that could be part of their recommendation corrections, that at least we all know about it, too, that we don't find out about it after we've given a contract, so that if there's any separation of duties or anything that you need to be aware of, that can be accommodated if that indeed is the right contractor. But just, anyway, thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Sure thing.
Yeah, the first issue is that there's no policy, right? So coming up with a policy as far as, and then the disclosure is a whole, another issue. I'm just curious, who, from a procedural standpoint, who has authority or who has the ability to add vendors to accounts payable?
2 people in my department. So the accounts payable manager and the accounts payable clerk. They're the only 2 that can add a vendor.
Okay. And then like the purchasing department, are they, kind of like the supplier control? Do they manage the relationships?
Yes,
They approve the
They go up
supplier?
with the contracts and, yeah,
Okay.
they check for debarment and all that stuff is the purchasing
Okay.
department.
Okay, I was just curious on that because we had this issue as far as, the potential conflict of interest, and then the next one was where there were a lot of dupes too. So you would think if the ability to add vendors is, it sounds like it's pretty restricted, two is very limited, then we could avert the issue of, what came up on number 4 is around the dupes. So anyways, we'll let Audrey talk about it for a minute, but I was just curious how that works. Thanks.
Thank you, Audit Committee Chair. And yes, the final finding, number 4, is around the duplicate vendors. We saw a number of vendors with the same name and same address, and recognized that the city had gone through somewhat of a cleanup process. It had not been finished, so there's still a number of documents that are left over that need to be cleaned up, which they recognize, and they've responded accordingly that they will be cleaning that up and deactivating duplicate vendors.
Yeah, so this, that we tried really hard. the old system had like over 4,000 vendors in it. And so we tried to go through that list and clean it all up. However, there are going to be some duplicates. State of Nevada has so many different departments and locations that we've just got several for State of Nevada. And then there's other companies too that have different locations for different items of purchase, or that's where their billing is. And so there are some duplicates for that reason. But I recognize we need to go through because something also happened during the implementation process where somehow a few of them got duplicated. So we recognize we have to go through that list one by one and just make sure it's where it needs to be.
If they are duplicated.
So I wanted to wrap up here with the analysis that we performed on all the accounts payable activity over the time frame of July through December 31st, 2019, and draw your attention to Appendix A, which is called the Benford's analysis on the check amounts. We looked at the first digit, and you can see here that we had acceptable conformity. What that means is we eliminated all the split payments that would look like duplicate payments. So the city paying a utility bill and that gets split out over various departments being the same amount. It may look like various departments are paying the same bill multiple times. So we removed those, what would appear to look like exceptions, and found that it followed a normal trend of Benford's analysis. And you can see here that the lower bound is the green line. I don't know if you printed yours in color, but I'm looking online so I can see the color. The upper is more of a like magenta pink, and then the expected count is in red. And we can see that the blue bars hit almost entirely at the very tip of those bubbles, which means that we have everything in conforming to what we were expecting, which is nefarious activity. Do we have some? We're not seeing that here in this particular graph. We roll forward and to the second digit, which means if we had $111, the first digit is the 1 and the second digit is the 1. So on the second graph, we're looking at Appendix B, Benford's analysis on the second digit, is where we started to see some spikes. And it's the same lower bound, upper bound, and the expected count red in the center. And all those red spikes, those columns that spike on, say, the number 25 and number 10 are the numbers that we had forwarded, or the information that we forwarded to purchasing, so that they were aware of where those spikes could potentially be nefarious activity. We're not saying that there's fraud. We're not saying that there has been any waste or abuse here. We're saying that these are areas that we should probably look into a little bit more and make sure that we have all the activity is above board. So that's what these two graphs are saying, and visual depiction as to what we're trying to say here.
So Audrey, quick question then. So for instance, it looks like they're kind of round dollar amounts, right? 45, 50,000, 60,000, 80,000. Did you do any further testing on invoices or payments in those amounts? Or is this mainly just a reference to kind of pay attention to these?
It's a combination of both. We did a lot of testing and we did take out a sample of these to see, hey, do we have any issues here with this activity? And what we sampled, we did not see any, but we still felt it important enough to share this with purchasing to ensure that they were aware of where these spikes occurred. And these came out of, they're outside of the norm, which is the only reason why we shared this information and the support to that. The other one being in the norm, we shared obviously that it's in the norm, but there wasn't any support that we needed to share at that time. So we did investigate a few and we didn't see any issues.
Okay, thank you. Another question on, back on the finding number 4 on the duplicates, the duplicate vendors. First off, did the vendor file include both vendors that were paid via check or wire or ACH and procurement card, or were they separate? Did you look at overlap between vendors that were paid, with both check and potentially with a P card?
Yes, we did. We looked to see if they had been overlapped multiple payments, duplicate payments with different means of payment. So exactly to your point, we looked at ACH, check, wire transfer. We made sure that they were not paid multiple times.
The vendor database
P-card.
that you looked at does it include the P card vendors?
Yeah, there's only one vendor database.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then just, from a materiality standpoint, there were no numbers in there as far as potential number of duplicates, and I'm sure it's going to take a lot of legwork to figure that out, but in your review, I'm just trying to get size or scope of it. There were let's say there's 4,000 vendors. Was there 40 potential duplicates, or was there 400 potential duplicates?
There might be about 400, but like I said, some of them are legitimate. So we really need to go through that list and find out which duplicates are legitimate and which ones are actually duplicates that can be deleted. So it's going to take about a year to go through that list. Just because, the person doing the P cards has to also process AP and P cards, so.
Okay. Other questions, comments? No? Okay. Thank you. Yeah, trying to get back to the front. Can I get a motion for approval of to accept the audit as it is?
I'll make a motion to accept the P-card audit as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Just clarity for the record, it's accounts payable.
And P card.
Accounts payable and procurement P-card setting.
See? Aye, I think everyone approved it, thank you. Okay, next item is, I got too many papers in front of me now. 6B, up for possible action discussion and possible action regarding the monitor review of the closure of the internal audit findings and/or recommendations included in the audit findings tracking report, and provide a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to close completed findings and/or recommendations. Sherry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So first I want to start with saying after the last meeting on 1/29/20, the committee recommended closure on capital projects 1, 2, and 3, the 18 and 19 external audits, and then there were several cash handling and HR items that were recommended for validation by the auditor. So I did not go to the board and recommend closure because there were only 5 little items. So I was waiting for that validation and for this meeting so that we could actually close them, and I'll go to the board with all of this as soon as we're done today. And I'm going to go through these a little slower just because Margie's new and I don't want her to be completely lost. You're welcome. So the first audit, the oldest audit, is the capital projects process review. That was done on May of 2018. And like I said, the green items 1, 3, and 5, were closed at the last meeting. They did finish the PM manual in February, March, as they said they were going to. It was in the review process the last time I reported to you. So I'm fairly confident we can close all of these items out. On page 4 is the long update. I highlighted it in red as to where they are and that they're done and they're moving forward. So this was an organizational review of all of our big capital projects. And I believe we can close all of them out.
We could just recommend closure of the capital projects process review audit in its
Yes.
entirety.
I'm sorry, I just
So you just
realized I
take it all
didn't
to the
color
board.
number 8 orange.
Yes, that's okay. But we really could just say, take this one to the board and close the whole, this audit would be closed.
Yes.
Every-
There were any questions on that one, or? Okay, that one's been open for quite some time, so I was pretty excited that one's done. The next one was the 18 findings, which the auditor in, over our fiscal 19 had no repeat comments. So I recommended closure on those at the last meeting. The fiscal year 19 audit finding, this actually related to fiscal year 18, and they did not find the same problem in fiscal year 19. So I'm recommending closure on that one as well. And you guys agreed with me at the last board meeting on January. The temporary staffing audit, there are still 2 items that we're fighting to get done here. One of them is a DA question, and the other one is the timesheets. And I'm sorry, I have, with all this COVID and all the estimates I'm being asked for in the budget, I have not had time to get these timesheets squared away. So I'll make that a priority before the next meeting. The cash handling audit, we had quite a few findings on this audit, and all of the recommended closures from last meeting were validated. I added a valid auditor validation column and put little Ys. Actually, I think Audrey added all the little Ys for me. There's only a few items outstanding. A lot of them have to do with getting a camera in place, and unfortunately, all our capital was cut due to this COVID-19 issue, so I'm not really sure exactly when that's going to occur, getting cameras for these, but I'm going to wait to recommend that we take it off, because if it's not as bad as we expect, we might be able to put some capital back on. So I just want to see where this goes before we take it off. I did get a hold of the treasurer and get some updates for you on 17, 18, and 20. And so the surprise audits that the treasurer was going to do, they said that COVID-19 has kind of killed them for this getting it done in the spring, so they're gonna shift it and get it done by summer, in the summertime. Start doing those audits. For 18, this was, they wanted to shift the counts to the morning instead of at night. And the treasurer said it really does work better in the morning, so they'll just update the policy for how they're actually doing it. And then on 20, right after we got this report, they sent out an email reminder to all the cash handlers to take the test, or the training. And at this point, almost every single person has completed that training. I think there's like 2 people that haven't. So most of that is, if we want to close 22, most of that's under control.
Hey, Sherry, back on 17, the unannounced kind of surprise audits, that I can't imagine that the audits take very long. Why would they?
No, the treasurer is just needs to do them. They need to go out and do cash audits, and since we were closed for several months, or a month and a half, they didn't get a chance to get out, and they had to revamp their policies and everything to go, so we could have people paying online for things, and so this COVID-19 has really disrupted everything. It's taken a lot of extra time to do our jobs because we have to figure out how to do it remotely instead of having people come to the counter.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. Other questions on cash handling? No, okay.
Okay. The social media audit, the city's managers where they thought they would be. They have developed a list of active social media accounts, and they've developed a policy around social media. That's 1 and 2. And then number 9, they have a form that they can that people can request another social media account, and it's all electronic and can be emailed to the social media coordinator and the city manager's office and approved. So those 3 I'm recommending closure. The rest of these, they didn't expect to be done until later, so I didn't ask for an update. And then the human resources, Audrey was able to validate 1, 3, and 4, and number 2, the HR manager said that they did use the employee self-service for open enrollment this year, and it went smoothly. It's paperless, so that's recommended for closure as well. And last but not least is the accounts payable. I did add these to the list, but obviously we haven't made any progress on them yet because we just got the report. So just as a recap, in the background analysis of the staff report, I put what I'm recommending for closure. So I'm recommending the 18 and 19 external audits, the entire capital projects audit, cash handling 1 through 9, 12 through 15, and item 19, and then if you want to close 22, since they do have most of that training done, and then the entire HR audit. If there's any questions, comments, happy to take them.
Hey, the cash handling, number 20, did they have a policy set up for retraining or training new people as they come into the department now?
Yeah, so they have a spreadsheet. Unfortunately, Policy Tech can't take videos, and the cash training is a video. So what they are doing is keeping a spreadsheet of all the cash handlers, and then as they take it, they're sending an email to their supervisor and then sending it to treasurer's office, letting them know they took it. So they're checking them off, and they're
Okay.
going to do that annually each year.
Good. Good news. Okay, any other comments, questions, concerns? Pretty straightforward.
I just have one quick comment that if there's about 28 recommendations here that we are asking your approval for closure, which is really, it was a mad push these last few months. And I feel like that's the one positive of COVID is we were actually able to do this remotely and get those recommendations verified through email, which was good to have that support. And it really spells nicely that we can get 28 of these closed when we still have probably a couple hundred left, it looks like, and we keep adding more.
Thanks.
Yeah, good work, thanks. Okay, we need a motion to approve closure of those recommended.
I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors closing the items discussed based on the correction of findings and recommendations included in the audit findings tracking report with the addition of item 20. That was pink. It can move to closure.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sherry, please tell all the staff. During the
Definitely
COVID,
will.
this was hard to do, but thank you for taking it seriously and working through it. So please pass that on to all the
Definitely pass
staff.
that on.
Yep, thank you. Okay, 6C, up for possible action, discussion and possible action to identify, discuss, and provide recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on projects to be performed by the internal auditor for the period ending June 30th, 2021. And
Yep, so this is a discussion of the 21 audit program, so next year.
Yep.
So basically, I let you and the internal auditor figure out what you want to audit for the city next year. I think some of their recommendations are great. The vehicle fleet, I would recommend to you just because we have a new manager there. And the new manager's been in place for about a year now, well, maybe a little less than a year, but anytime you have a new manager on a program that big, it's probably a good idea to just make sure everything's still intact. So I'll turn it over to Audrey.
Excellent. So Eide Bailey conducted the risk assessment for 2020 and for the 2020-2021 fiscal year proposed internal audit plan. And again, another positive of COVID is that we were able to execute about 80% of this during that time frame. And the timing couldn't have been better with regards to risk and addressing the risk real time and speaking with people who are working from home and speaking with them about their processes and the controls as well as the risks and the vulnerabilities. And we spoke to just about every single department head. I can't think of one department we did not reach out to. We also spoke with your external auditors, Piercy, Boley, Taylor, and Kern. I wonder if they have an acronym. That would be easier to use. But we had listed out a number of risks and categories and areas, and you will see here on the audit plan as it rolls forward, we had 2 that we did not get to this year that roll onto the plan for this next coming fiscal year, as well as the ones that we identified from this risk assessment through this process. So in addition to the interviews with the department heads and speaking with your external auditors and the city manager, finance, we also looked at your strategic plan and did a roll forward from the risk assessment last year with a survey that we had administered and built upon that to identify ongoing risks and areas of concern. Audits that we had completed and noted, obviously the risks are reduced when we have recommendations and areas of concern that have been remediated. So those risks are reduced. So we take that into consideration as well. So it's a layering on approach, and we feel that this really allows us to expand on the prior risks and the learnings from the audits that are conducted going forward. So what you'll see here is an audit plan. We know that we have a set budget, and these are really up to the audit committee to determine, like last year, which audits to actually conduct. So we won't be able to do all of these for the budgeted amount. As you can see, it totals about 150. So it's picking and choosing which ones and which ones not to do.
Okay.
Questions?
I have a question on the IT vulnerability audit. We had talked about this before, and they had mentioned that they were still putting the systems together. Would it be too early to have an audit on the IT vulnerability right now, or wait to let them get the rest of the system set up?
I think for this COVID situation that we've had to implement some processes to make sure that the system is secure with all these people working at home.
Absolutely.
So actually, I think it's a great time.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay,
because-
got it. That makes much
Yeah.
more sense. Yeah, it makes much more sense now. Okay, thanks.
I agree. Makes the most sense right now to do it and fix anything that we inadvertently opened up. So I would say for me, the IT vulnerability is first, or is paramount.
refresh
Would be another.
yeah, no, I think that's a great one. The citywide budget monitoring audit, refresh my memory, that's a carryover from actually 1819. Refresh my memory on what we were trying to accomplish with that and what brought it to the forefront.
I don't know. I honestly, I think that was an idea from somebody. personally, I don't know that there's a lot of risk in that area. I wouldn't suggest auditing it just because every department is responsible for their budget and finance oversees that spending to make sure they are within their budget. We look at it citywide 3 times a year in depth. And if there are any problems, we look at it in November, December, and then again in March. So, I mean, if there are any problems, we catch it far enough in advance to notify that department and make some corrections. So it wouldn't be a huge area for me, but the other one I was thinking wouldn't be a huge area is investments. We outsource that to, a professional investor, so there's not a lot of risk there either.
Audrey, talk about if you guys were to do an audit of the budget monitor or budget process, what would you do there?
We would look at the initial budgeting process and how the information is communicated to the various departments. In the past, we have seen breakdowns of not with your city, I'm talking with other municipalities here. So through benchmarking and comparison that budgeting tends to either change their templates or change their systems, and then the communication that goes with that tends to fall down to the departments, or lack of communication to the departments, who are then supposed to be updating their budgets, either starting from a zero budget or priority-based budgeting, and sometimes those change. And so it's the training related to that, the front end communication in the process, the procedures around getting that approved, and then any budget changes and whether or not that gets communicated to the right boards and committees. So the proper methods and procedures along with the transactions, and are they timely and accurate? Are we adjusting things on the budget that we're not supposed to? So really it's across the spectrum from beginning to end.
Okay, thank you. Lori, have we had any issues from a board standpoint, from the Board of Supervisors with the budgeting process?
No, I don't think so overall. I think if I really want to recall what this also dealt with, is there any best practices in the budgeting process that we're not utilizing? So the forms that we use, the methods, is there anything that would give us better information? Is there methodologies in the budget processes? And so I know for me personally, there's one of the first things we were working on that we had never done before is things like, what's the average rate of turnover that you have in the personnel department? So should you 100% budget personnel, or should you only budget money at 95%? Because then the other 5% can be put to capital, if that makes sense. So I think I was looking, for me in the budget arena, is there any best practices or methodologies that we should be practicing to hone any of our budget skills? So you can look at it in, again, 2 different ways. I don't think it's that the team isn't doing a good job of monitoring 3 times a year is how are we hitting the budget mark. But is there any opportunities in the original budget process that we're not taking advantage of? And so, but you can look at that 2 ways too, right? You can be conservative, but we have one thing, if you leave the money in the department budget level, then they spend it within their group and move it around, versus should we as the city as a whole say, I'm going to tamp that down a little bit because we may have some other higher priorities that we want to put the money to. So that's really what I looked at as the budget process itself. Is there anything we can do better?
We actually don't allow transfers from salary savings to services and supplies.
To anywhere else?
We
So-
don't, because
right.
we use those for capital.
But
So
But they
very
could do
rarely, if they've got a
overtime.
problem or
Right.
they're going to need an augmentation later, then we'll
Let them
we'll
move
let
that.
them move it, but very rarely.
Right, but
Yeah.
that's really the whole, but the objective again is, do we let them budget at the full 100%? So those are just, sometimes again, having someone come from the 50,000 foot level and saying, is there anything in there? How important is it? I don't know that it certainly ranks high on my priority list when I look at this, because for me, I look at the IT vulnerability, the vehicle fleet, and potentially the revenue and accounts receivable, the audit risk, follow-up, fraud, waste, and abuse. If you looked at that, that puts us at $103,500. We have a $110,000 budget. That gives us a little bit of wiggle room if something else comes up, but again, those are just what I see on this chart.
Okay. Sherry, did the budget, does the new ERP have budgeting software in it?
Yes, HTE did too.
Okay.
Both of our systems have budget software. Yeah,
Does it
and
work well?
It does. It stops employees if they overspend. It warns them if they're overspent on a line item, but if they're going to overspend their function, it won't let them spend anymore.
Okay.
It's
good.
pretty robust. It's a great
Good.
system.
Okay. Question on the IT audit. How did we come up with the budget of 250 hours? Just curious. Did we scope this at all, or how did we come up with that number?
Sorry, Chairman. This is Audrey, and this was speaking with my IT, or our IT group at Eide Bailly within our risk advisory services, recognizing the size of your organization, the number of networks, servers, nodes, employees. This was looked at from that perspective. So there was some preliminary scoping working with Eric Van Schimmelman and recognizing that this is an area that he felt was a higher priority within his organization as well. And recognizing the size and complexity, this is where we came up with those numbers.
Okay. I thought we had we could scope it down somewhat because a lot of the IT infrastructure runs on the state, right? And
On the state backbone.
in theory, we should be able to scope some of that out, I would think. We're not going to audit the state.
No, but I believe it's just the Wi-Fi that runs through the state mainly.
Oh,
So it's not our whole system. We have
Okay.
our own servers and, yeah.
no, this is an important area. We've been talking about this IT thing for 2 years probably. So we were waiting to get the new ERP in and jump
Yeah,
on
the
this.
new
so-
ERP's in, DevNet's in. I think it's a good time to get
Good,
this.
good. Any other questions, comments? I tend to agree. I think the budget audit really, not one of our primary concerns, and the investment thing, since it's outsourced, I don't know,
Those are the two I miss.
and that totals 46,500, so it takes us down below
103.5.
where we're at for a budget, so it leaves us a little bit of room to adjust and adapt as we go through the year here. But I would think the rest of these are, at least in my opinion, I think these are warranted and things that have been on our radar for a little while, so I'm excited to get on them.
I think they make a lot of sense too. The revenue and receivable, again, it makes a lot of sense to do it like maybe in November, December, because last year we were closing everything on the old system. So to do a receivable test on the old system's kind of a waste of time. But now we can close this year in the new system, and then there'll be a whole year of that they can test. So,
Okay.
yeah, I think this works good.
Great.
And that does free up hours or time or money as it comes up a special request, which we have done in the past. We've gone in and helped departments when they've had a question at the approval of the audit committee. So it's good to have a buffer there. So if something does come up, we'd have a little bit of wiggle room to assist where needed.
Yeah, that's great. Appreciate it.
Just as a thought, even on assisting, because I thought of this, we have the money that's coming in from COVID, and we may be developing some type of a plan to assist some of our small businesses. So there may be a few hours or something that we would like Eide Bailly to help us make sure we're going to hit on all cylinders so that we don't have audit non-compliance that we're unaware of. So I think it's great that we're going to leave a little bit of dollars here. We have to spend it by December or something like, wow, we got to hit the ground running on this. So there may be a little bit of you just double checking before we release any money out onto the street that we've complied, just as a second look that says, yes, you hit that check mark, yes, 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 or oops, you guys are missing a component piece. So I think it's great we're going to leave a little, because that might be one of those assistance things that Sherry's team might like to, hey, just look at this for us and make sure we're not going to have to give the federal government back any money.
Yeah. No, and we're looking at that very closely. We're working with NACO and Clark County because they've already started to develop their program. So we're using resources that we can locally to make sure our program is similar to those around us, so we don't get in that situation. But it would be good to have a double check.
So I have a question on, on the COVID. So you get dollars into the city for COVID, and then you can distribute them to other places. So it's
So
not
there's-
just specifically for city.
There's several different acts right now.
Okay.
There's the Families First that required us to give sick time to our employees, 80 additional hours.
Okay.
And then, so that was a required federal act that required us to spend money. But then we've gotten stimulus money from several different grants. In the health department, we've got one from JAG, so the judicial and police. We got one for fire. So they all have different requirements and different ways that we have to spend them. The big one recently is from the CARES Act, and that's the one that allows us to help local businesses. It helps us internally too with some of our expenses that aren't covered by the other stimulus money. It's going to help. We can pass it on to some of the school district if they have expenses, hospitals. I mean, we really have to call around and spread a wide net and find these expenses and then figure out how much we can give to who. So we did get a big pot of money, so we're just trying to figure out. It's very new. We just found out a couple days ago, so.
That's amazing.
yeah.
I work for Nevada Health Centers, and we get money, but it's within, like, different departments within our company because we are a federally qualified health center. So we keep it internal, except there are a few things we're sharing with hospitals. So that's what I wanted to understand. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So I think we're ready for a motion to approve the 2021 audit program.
I'll make a motion to accept the audit program, eliminating the citywide budget monitoring audit and the investments audit, totaling $103,500.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes. Thank you. Okay, next item up for discussion, 6D, discussion regarding the FY20 audit program update and the hotline activity. Sherry?
Yeah, and I'm going to have this every meeting, just because I think it's important that you guys hear what Audrey's been doing, and then obviously get an update on the fraud, waste, and abuse. We usually stick it in somewhere on an item, but it should probably be its own little item. So it might not be very long because we just talked about all this stuff, but this should be here every meeting. I'll turn it over to Audrey.
Thank you, Sherry. I have Kim Higgins on the line with us as well, and I was just notified that she doesn't have the ability to unmute herself, and questioning if that's something that is controlled on your end, if we can have her unmuted.
Yes, Desi, can you please unmute Kim Higgins? Thank you.
Kim is unmuted.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to just, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to contribute to the COVID-19 discussion and let you know that we have a COVID-19 response team at Eide Bailey and a website that we can provide you that could have numerous resources for you to tap into as well. We're also helping the state of Nevada So if you need any of that, we give weekly webinars. We also have articles that are written specifically in the governmental arena that are available to you at a moment's notice.
Great, thank you.
All right, so the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, we had a number of reports that came through this system, Lighthouse system, and they were all from the same individual reporting on one person from one of your component units, which is the airport. This has been escalated every way to sideways. We have notified the city manager, Nancy, at Carson City. We've notified the airport's board, and we've notified the auditors, which happen to be Eid Bailey, and let them know what the allegations are. And Nancy has reached out to the individual to let them know different protocols. If the allegation is dealing with fraud, waste, and abuse, this is the avenue you need to go and contact this person. If it's misconduct, you need to contact the Board of Supervisors. So this individual is very well informed. We have not had any more reports from them, and just wanted you to know as well that this has gone through that system, the process. It's all been closed down. From city's side in the system has been the reports have been closed down, and the individual has been moved in the right direction so he can get the closure and the actions that he's looking for. So that was on the fraud, waste, and abuse. There were no other reports aside from those 4 that came from that individual.
Okay, great, thank you. Hey, quick question, how do people know about the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline?
It's all, it's on our website. Every employee knows about it. We promote it pretty good.
Okay,
And the issue with the airport is it's not our entity. It's a component unit, so we have no control over them. The board does appoint the authority, the members of the authority, but that's it. So they do have a separate auditor, as Audrey said, so Eid Bailey's aware and can look into those allegations. But unfortunately, we can't spend city money when it's not our entity.
so let me make sure I understand, the airport operates on its own budget, its own,
Yep,
they do all their own accounting,
yep,
payroll, stuff like that?
yep,
Okay.
they're their own entity.
Okay. All right, any other comments, questions, concerns? No, that's,
I'll move into the audits and activity that we were able to complete for FY 19 and 20.
okay,
We had 7 audits that were planned. We were able to execute 5 of the 7 planned audits. And you saw the 2 that we weren't able to execute. Those were rolled over onto the 2021 plan. So that was the budget monitoring and the revenue accounts receivable audit. So you'll see you probably have a last minute addition to your advanced material. So you should have a list here showing where our budgeted hours were, what our actual hours were, the amounts, and then the amount of our donated services. There were some complications with understanding what the former partner had done on the pricing for this engagement, which we quickly adjusted to, and we had some overages in some of these audits because not only did we go over in hours, we had gone over with utilizing individuals at a higher capacity than what had originally been budget for the engagement. So for instance, fee structure, we had a number of, early in the engagement, we recognized that it was more complicated than putting a junior staff looking at, Parks and Rec or community planning and development's fee structure. So this was heavily leaned towards partner and senior manager involvement in that engagement. When it comes to the P card and social media, those were just different animals in and of themselves. We didn't, quite frankly, have enough hours budgeted to get through the payables and the P card process without going over. So you will see we did stick to the original 154 approved budget, and we have donated services for everything above and beyond that, including the 2 audits that we were not able to execute this year. We donated the services for the preliminary work that went into those audits, such as building out the audit program, all that upfront approval process that went into that. Kim, was there anything you wanted to add?
I looked at that, the addendum we got late, and I don't have it in front of me, but can you just give us the totals on what the, oh, okay, thanks. Okay, give me a minute to look at this.
I didn't do an extended total, what it is minus the donated services, but I'm putting this into Excel right now so it can help.
So the donated service ended up being essentially what the overages were?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Okay, great. We love donated services, so thank you.
Keep that trend. Oh, no.
All right, any other comments, questions for Audrey? I appreciate the update, and we enjoyed working with you this year. I think we got through a lot of things considering the switch over and all the other items we had going on with the ERP conversion and so forth, so really appreciate your guys' hard work and efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, they've been great to work with. I honestly think we've gotten much better deal working with Eid Bailey. I know they're actually doing procedures, so it's good.
That's a good thing. Okay, that wraps up 60. 6E is the discussion on next committee meeting, so I'm assuming we want to have it in the Q1 fiscal period, so we usually shoot for what, like September?
Well, I think the next meeting we should do maybe late July or early August, because we'll bring a bunch of audit programs that relate to the 21 program that you just approved.
Okay,
So before they get started, you guys have wanted to see the audit programs. So we probably want to do it earlier in the quarter than later, so they can get started.
Early August.
Does
is
that
better
work
for
for
me
you,
than end of
Audrey, if we do it
July.
earlier?
Yes, it does. The end of July, beginning of August would be a good time for you guys to approve those.
how would August 4th look for everyone?
Good for me. Works for me.
So long as it can be, if we can do like a 1:30, because I have one that gets done at 1 on the Tuesdays, because that's a
Okay.
Tuesday, right?
Yeah, Tuesday the
So
4th.
I'm done with a meeting that I normally do on the first Tuesdays. So long as we can do 1:30-ish, I can make it.
We can do 1:30.
Is this room available on Tuesdays at that time?
I have to check with
Okay,
the
yeah.
Parks Department, so it should be.
Okay.
So that would be 2:30 our time, and I'm available. Kim, are you available that day?
No, I can't attend that day, but to approve the audit programs, I think that's not significant.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Tuesday, August 4th at 1:30 PM.
Yep. I
Sounds
got
like
it. I will confirm that with the parks that this room's available, and via email, let you guys know.
Okay, great. Sounds like a winner. Thank you.
And I'm presuming that the actual specific priorities that you have are going to be reflected in your minutes. Number 1, number 2, number 3, the way you'd like us to proceed.
We wanted IT first, right? Did we all
Yeah, I
agree it was
think IT,
Yeah.
and maybe we should revisit that.
IT first, vehicle fleet second?
Right, and vehicle fleet was 2, and then the payables was the 3rd.
Right.
Priority-wise. Right, receivables.
That'll get you
Receivables,
started.
okay.
Business revenue.
We
Okay.
said it,
Yeah.
or I did, and we all agreed, right?
Okay, with that, did we have any public join?
There is no public comment, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Okay, thanks. Todd, do I still have to read that? No, it doesn't matter, but-
Mr. Chair, you technically officially have to ask for public comment, and I think you've done that. And
Okay.
since there is none, you can move on to the next
Okay,
one.
great. That's good, thanks. And with that, this quarterly audit committee meeting adjourns, and thanks for everyone's help and participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.